Yo, what's go, and welcome to the video. This one's going to cover the Phase 2 rotation I've been using, an alternate Phase 2 rotation that the Druid Discord and Wowhead suggests, a couple of sim settings, I'm going to be simming a couple of things, and how our rotation is going to change for Phase 3. And to help you out, if you want to move around the video, skip certain things, the timestamps will be in the description. Starting off with the Wowhead rotation, I agree with most of this. I only change, I think, 2 things for my personal rotation. But pre-pot Potion of Wild Magic, apply Fairy Fire, cast your Treants at the feet of the boss. This can be changed like after Starfall or after Insect Swarm if your specific guild pulls Lust or Heroism a little bit later to the start of the fight. But as long as they're out before Heroism or Bloodlust, no big deal. And then cast Starfall and Insect Swarm, which Insect Swarm with the 4-piece tier 8 bonus should be maintained throughout the fight, but allow it to fall off before reapplying. Do not reapply if there are less than 7 seconds remaining on Lunar Eclipse. Wait for the eclipse to expire. This is where I change a little bit. I just keep Insect Swarm up as soon as it falls off, no matter solar, lunar, however much time is left on either one of those. Keeping my Insect Swarm up to give more chance for the Starfire proc. This is another big thing that I do not do in my rotation, is casting Moonfire. So this should be recast immediately after Solar Eclipse expires or while on the move if it is not already applied. I'm holding Moonfire just for when I move. I don't have any glyphs to buff Moonfire's damage. I do usually have 2 out of 2 Moonfire, or improved Moonfire though. If you fail to enter Lunar Eclipse before Moonfire falls off, reapply. Another reason why I don't really lean towards Moonfire is I haven't had improved Insect Swarm all of Phase 2. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then spam Wrath until you proc a Lunar, or use your Hyper Speed, and Potion of Speed if you do not pre-pot. So here I just use Potion of Magic for everything. If I don't pre-pot, I'm still using a Potion of Wild Magic. Usually, as soon as I have Fairy Fire and Treants down, I'll pop it with my Starfall. Spam Starfire during Lunar Eclipse and continue after expiration until you proc a Solar. Spam Wrath during Solar and continue to proc a Lunar. Then the next 2 notes are just when to use your cooldowns when they come back up. And with the 4-piece tier 8 proc, it says it should be used immediately except when fishing for lunar eclipses. For the most part, I'm following this rotation, except for, I'm not keeping Moonfire up only while I'm moving. I'm keeping Insect Swarm up 100%, 95%, because I do let it fall off, and I'm just using Potions of Wild Magic. So with that rotation comes their Spec, which I just switched my Spec to this exact same one, except for I can't get rid of 1 point in Nature's Reach, for it is just too big of an issue. So I only have 2 out of 3 improved Insect Swarm. There's multiple ways to adjust this for pure single target, taking out Gale Winds, Typhoon, throwing those in Brambles. If you have 0 mana issues, you can even take out Omen of Clarity and Moonglow, throw those in Genesis. A couple little tweaks here and there if you're looking for a pure single target. But me, I love doing trash damage as well, so I can't get rid of my Typhoon and Gale Winds points. And the glyphs that Wildhead suggests are Insect Swarm, Starfall, and Starfire. So with that high Moonfire uptime, the Glyph of Starfire is going to give the Moonfire 3 extra ticks, and for the most part the sim values this slightly more than the Glyph of Focus. And speaking of the sim, let's take a look at it really quick. Starting with all of these settings. Most of these are agreed upon that it's the standard to use. The 3-minute fight timer, a lot of people do 30-second increments. They'll do 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 4 minutes, 2:30. But when I'm on here, I just leave it at 180, and I change the fight length to plus or minus 15 seconds. For the rotation, I go to Manual, Smart Cooldown Usage, Moonfire I have unused, Insect Swarm maximize, use Starfire, use Wrath. Player Latency is another one that's default 200. I've never messed with this. I haven't seen anybody else really mess around with this either. And then the Eclipse priority is set to Lunar. And for a player, I'm a Tauren with Engineering and Tailoring. I know there's a lot of jewel crafters out there, so just make sure that your professions are what you actually have. And then consumables, there's a lot of people that use Potions of Speed, but I always keep mine Wild Magic. The Elixir is going to be the Frostworm. Food's just going to be the Fish Feast. And I know when people are simming for like best in slot, they're trying to get that DPS value as high as they can, so they're hitting Sapper and Serenite Bomb. I'm usually lazy and don't Sapper. Requires you to be really close to the boss. So just for simming purposes, I just keep Serenite Bomb on and that's it. And the cooldown for Bloodlust, I think it defaults 2 seconds. It's See a lot of people simming at 5 seconds. It does add a little DPS usually, but feel free to move this around wherever your guild pops the bloodlust. The distance from target only kind of matters if the fight is going to end with a wrath cast. The closer you are to the target, the shorter that wrath has to travel, so it might give you an extra wrath if you set this to, say, 5. For the most part, 18 is the standard. With the raid buffs, typically you're going to have all the buffs. The only thing to really note here is Demonic Pact. For phase 2, I believe 4,500 is the standard number, which means that your Demonic Pact buff will be 450. It's a little high for my guild. Ours, I would say, is about 400, but to be hopeful, I leave it at 4,500. For phase 3, we could bump this up to 5,000. Checking the talents really quick, I have that Wowhead spec, except for that 1 point from improved insect swarm is moved up to fill out Nature's Reach. And then I'm still rocking that Glyph of Focus instead of Glyph of Starfire. Got all of my current gear plugged in here. The default iterations I think is 3,000. I bump it up to 25,000. It takes a couple more seconds, but when simming 3,000 iterations 3 times, you're going to get a pretty wide variance of your DPS. So to try to reduce that variance, I'd bump it up to 25,000. For my current gear, I'm just over 9,000 DPS. If I wanted to switch and see what my DPS would look like if I did use all of the Wowhead suggestions, I can do that. I'll save this as a reference. Change Moonfire from being unused to before Lunar, and swap my Glyph of Focus to the Glyph of Starfire. And now I'm ready to sim again. So by making those changes, I could get about 10 extra DPS, which to me isn't worth it. I like to have as much of an overall spec and glyph setup as possible. And there's way too many movement fights, so I like having Moonfire as a backup GCD in case I'm moving. I know it won't be up on the boss unless I have to reposition. But if this was a pure single target fight, and I didn't have to move like a Razor Scale or Ignis, then this could give me a little bit of extra DPS. And just to see how the other talent points would boost the DPS for pure single target, I'll save this one and switch the talents. I no longer have the Gale Winds Typhoon, but instead have Genesis and Brambles. Can't forget taking out Omen of Clarity for that second point in Genesis. So for that pure single target, switching those talents would give me an extra 60 DPS. And if you're lucky and don't have threat issues, and you can fill out that improved insect swarm, last point gave an extra 48 DPS. So with all those little tweaks, it's over 100 DPS, but again, for pure single target. But when comparing your sim numbers to others on, say, the Druid Discord, they might be using some of these different talent points and getting extra DPS. But when you're trying to min-max, little things like this really adds up. On to the phase 3 discussion. I went on the sim yesterday and I was testing a whole lot of stuff. And I started with just some random like 5 out of 5 tier 9 set that I put together. And I slowly made changes, testing if it was a DPS increase or not. The first thing was I switched to the new Moonfire idol and gained 45 DPS, which was interesting to see. So next phase, we can finally get rid of the Starfire idol and use the new Moonfire idol instead. I switched other things like Glyphs, the talents. I switched to the spec that I had the 2 out of 3 improved insect swarm with, switching from Moonfire to before Lunar all the way to max. Also not using insect swarm, so just flipping the 2 dots pretty much. So phase 3, only insect swarm while moving, and keep Moonfire up as much as you can. And this was already with 4-piece tier 9, so this could change at the start of phase 3. This might not all add up, but once you get the 4-piece tier 9, this stuff should hold true. I tried the double 2-piece, so 2-piece tier 8, 2-piece tier 9. That didn't look to be really good at all, so I plan on switching 4-piece for 4-piece. Reign of the Dead appears to be a really strong trinket as long as the sim calculating the damage proc from it correctly. Switching the Demonic Pact up an extra 500 gave 105 DPS, which comparing top DPS logs to your own, this could be something that is affecting your personal DPS if your raid doesn't have a strong Demonic Pact buff, or you can see that it really affects your personal DPS. And the last thing that I checked was how close was this set going to get to the crit soft cap, which is 100% crit chance for Starfire while in a lunar phase. 40% from the lunar eclipse, almost 38.5% from the gear with Intellect, Kings, and Mark of the Wild while in Moonkin form. 4% from our talent, Nature's Majesty. 3% from our improved Fairy Fire. 3% from improved insect swarm, as long as you have all 3 points in there. And that's while Moonfire's up, which we should be having Moonfire up the entire fight. And then there's 8% from raid debuffs from, say, your Ret Pally or the Shaman Totem or your Mage or Warlock. And then this new idol gives 4.35% crit. And that's to every spell, not just Starfire or Wrath, like the previous tier sets have done. So in this set with all of those buffs, I'm just over that 100% chance to crit with Starfire. The final thing to do was to switch my Glyphs to Starfire, Starfall, and Moonfire. I've got my overall spec here. Changed Demonic Pact from 4,500 to 5,000. And I've got my whole Phase 3 set plugged in and ready to go. So with these settings, I'm just over 12,000 DPS. I think there's some people that have around 12,300 right now, but they could have a different spec with Brambles, 3 out of the 3 Insect Swarm. They might prefer that Speed Pot. They could have the Sapper Charge activated. So there's a little wiggle room there. But again, I'll link this set in the description for 80 upgrades if you want to take a look. Switch the gear around, sim a little bit yourself. I'd love to see what your Phase 3 set's looking like right now. This might not be what I go for, but it definitely got me started and hyped, looking forward to Phase 3. So thanks for watching, and good luck for the rest of Phase 2.
Whenever I say BB, it means like baby, but you guys know Let's Go BB means Blazing Bob. I just thought of it just now. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah, it happens to me all the
Let's go,
time.
Blazing Bob.
I thought it meant big boner.
Same.
Dude, you said that really, like you were really into that.
Yeah.
I thought it meant big boner.